Well, how you doing, Gideon's Tactical family? Thanks for joining me on another blade review, coming at you from the Black Hills of South Dakota, where I have with me today the Benchmade Anonimus. This is a CPM Cruwear fixed blade that Benchmade recently has released. I've had it now, I bought it within a week of it coming onto the market, and have really gotten a good feel for it over the last few months, using it quite a bit to see what its capabilities are, but what are its limitations. And what I have found and what I want to share with you today is that there are some amazing attributes to the design, but there are some big shortcomings as well. So when this knife was released, Benchmade also dropped a video just kind of explaining what the purpose and design behind and the idea of the tool was. And what they say in that video is that it is designed to be a survival, bushcrafting, semi-tactical blade. That is a lot that is trying to be accomplished in this tool. And so we're going to look first here at the blade itself. What we're looking at is a 5-inch blade overall from handle to tip. That's a great blade length for a lot of different capabilities that I just listed. The cutting edge is about 4.5. Now this is the first thing. It does have, I would say, a 2/3 saber grind, great grind for a lot of different tasks, and gives it a little bit more strength than a full flat, and definitely a little strength behind the edge than, say, like a Scandi would for just a straight bushcraft. So, okay, I think that's a pretty good grind. The first thing is the thickness. This is a full tang constructed knife, but it comes in thinner than 1/8 of an inch thick. This is a thin blade, very, very thin, which means that it has the potential to be a great food prep knife, and I saw that. Basic utility knife, you know, if you're going through cardboard, cordage, rope, those type of activities. But I argue when we say survival knife, really the industry standard, what most people think of, what most people look for, is between 0.16 or 5/32 of an inch thick to 3/16. And so to have a knife that is this thin, I mean, this is as thin as a kitchen knife or a fillet knife is really what I think of when I think sub 1/8 of an inch thick. Now, there may be some potential that could retract from that because of this type of steel that they're using, which is CPM Cruwear steel. Now, I've only used that in one other knife from Benchmade, and it was my Anonimus, the full size that they recently upgraded to that type of steel. It is well done with an excellent heat treat. It is a very, very good steel. It is tough. It is durable. It's not super difficult to hone the edge when it does need some tuning up, but it will hold that edge for a very long period of time. And from my experience, is not brittle. Like some super steels and more of the stainless steel arena can tend to be brittle, can tend to snap. This one has a level of toughness that you don't always see, but still it comes down to just pure robustness of the tool. At 5 inches, I want something that's a little bit thicker, at least 5/32 or 0.116, to give me just a little bit, not only weight behind it to do some light hacking if I had to, some light delimbing, but also just give it some lateral strength so that I know that if I do have to pound on it, if there are some lateral motions that I'm doing, possibly in that semi-tactical role as they alluded to, it just gives me that much more strength, particularly at this length. If it was a shorter blade at maybe like 4 inches overall, maybe we could get away with that. But I feel like that is the first detractor because it's so thin. Yes, it's a wicked slicer. Yes, it's very good at the fine work, but the heavier, harder work that I would put in the survival category, it just does not excel. And so to me, it's not a survival knife. It just doesn't fit that category for me. Even the tip, just as an example, I'm going to be running in the Reef Knives F4. That's a slightly smaller blade, but it comes in at 5/32 of an inch thick. You can see that the tip is a little bit thicker, so there's a more trustability. If I was stabbing, if I had to dig something out, you know, something like that, that I just don't have when I'm using this tool. And if I have to choke way up and use my thumb on the back spine to do a push cut, it's so thin near the edge, near the tip, excuse me, that it tends to push in and really bite into my thumb, and it's just not comfortable for those bushcrafting tasks where a slightly thicker blade with a slightly thicker spine around the tip would give me a little bit more platform to work with to just manipulate the tool. That also bleeds into, because of how thin it is, the weight. Yes, it's extremely lightweight at under 6 ounces for a 5-inch blade is very good to see. But in so doing, again, it limits its survival capability. It just doesn't have any weight behind it or inertia if you did have to do light delimbing or things like that. If you do think it's going to be your go-to survival knife, there's just not the weight behind it to do some of those heavier tasks. Now, it does come with a Bolteron sheath, and this is a polymer very similar to Kydex. Just has some different properties. You'll see Bolteron on a lot of other knife sheaths that are out there, as well as a lot of firearm holsters. Now, this is a pancake design, which means it has a pretty wide footprint. I think the knife deserves to have more of like a taco shaped design that would have slimmed it down and lightened it even more. It is very thin, so that is nice, and it is very light. It comes in at just under 3 ounces for the entire sheath package, so that is pretty impressive. It does have a removable fire steel loop. It is kind of a flexible rubberized polymer that will fit most medium to small diameter fire steels. And again, you can completely unscrew them, take it off if that's something that you don't need. It does have a drainage hole, and it is ambidextrous. You can unscrew it and swap it. The one thing that I did note is that this webbing is pretty small. I can only get 2 fingers through there, whereas on my K-bar fighting knife with a very similar style, I can get all 4 of my fingers through that webbing. So this is just going to be able to fit a lot larger belts. It does have 3 screws that you can adjust somewhat the tension on. I found that unless you really crank these all the way down and basically mush out the gaskets, you can easily just flick the sheath off, and it doesn't really sit quite as snug as several of my other fixed blades out there. I mean, it clicks in. It's silent, so that's a good thing. You know, if you're using this as maybe on a hunt or something like that, a little bit better retention, in my opinion, would have been ideal. But if you're riding it on your hip, there's nothing really to worry about. You only really have to think about that if you were wanting to ride it upside down on a shoulder strap or on an LBE system. So next comes in this handle. Now, it's a 5-inch handle, so 10 inches overall for this blade, so it's dimensionally very well done. This is contoured G10 with nice ribbing. I'm very happy about that. So it gives you some good texture without it causing any sort of hot spots or issues. And because it's not squared off and blocky, the ergonomics in the sense of its roundness are really well done. Now, the trouble comes in not only in the thickness, because it's 0.68 overall maximum thickness right here at the palm swell, and then tapers on either side, meaning that the neck, though scalloped, is pretty thin. And so what ends up happening is I have a pretty narrow, thin pinch point where I'm going to be putting most of my leverage, most of my work in, and just doesn't compete with other blades. Again, I'm just referring because I have it on hand and I'm using it, and it kind of fits in this size range and, you know, G10 handles. The F4 from Reef Knives, it's a much thicker handle, fills out my hand a lot more, feels more comfortable for extended woodscraft use. If this is, maybe we see, okay, well, it's not really a survival knife, maybe that's just kind of like a marketing thing. Maybe it's better at bushcraft. Yes, the blade 100% is a little bit better for that because of how thin it is, but the handle then, because it's following suit and also rather thin and narrow near the neck, causes it to feel too small and more like a pocket knife than a bushcraft knife in my hand. But the complications don't end there with the handle. It comes into this oversized guard. One, it's not necessary. I think it's kind of obnoxious if they had just made it in line with the edge. Not only would that have just been more aesthetically pleasing, but still giving you all of the protection that a guard would give you. The downfall really comes into that this secondary portion here is exposed and not milled. It is sharp on the sides, meaning that, again, going back to the woodscraft, if we're saying maybe it's better suited for that than survival, and I'm going to be working with this, not only is the neck narrow, but now my finger is riding all up on that guard, and it is not comfortable. It creates a hot spot for me on my index finger because they didn't either continue that G10 handle further down, like say the F4, contouring and covering up that guard so that's nice and comfortable but still giving me protection. And just as 2 other examples, here's an ANV knife. Even though it's mostly exposed, it's really well milled, so it's just not as sharp, and this is just a straight, you know, field knife tactical blade. Here's the Rock 62. Again, the handle scale is going down, protecting me from that steel guard for most of its transition, giving me more comfortability. And so what's occurring is that this portion right here around the neck with the guard, and then that, kind of blocky jimping, it's not, too aggressive, doesn't cause any problems, gives you a little bit to grab onto, is really more focused like as a dedicated tactical knife. And in so doing, creates a little bit of a hot spot for any woodworking that you're gonna be doing for an extended period of time. And that flows into this extra large ricasso right here that is 90'd, so you can throw sparks with it. It is designed to throw sparks here. Now it has to be the diameter of this little choil ricasso right there. It does work. I mean, I was easily able to get a fire going with that, so it is absolutely functional in that and really grabs and connects with your fire steel a lot more than just a 90 wood. And so it's trying to be all of these things simultaneously, and in so doing, for me and how I use tools, I don't know where to put it. I'm like, it's too thin, and I wouldn't use it as like on my LBE system for like a run and gun at the range. I wouldn't use it as a bushcraft knife because it causes too many hot spots, and it's too light and too thin for me to use it as a dedicated survival knife. So it's like, where does this tool fit into my rotation? Now, in just a moment, I'll hit two competitive options that I think are actually better suited for what this knife is trying to accomplish. But price is a factor coming into this as well. This is going to be $260, give or take a few bucks. And so at that price point, for a knife that really can't seem to figure out where it's supposed to fit, just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, in retrospect, if you just want a really premium American-made dedicated bushcraft knife, one great option is what I've been running in, this Reef Knife F4. It's gonna be slightly smaller, but you can see through what I've been showing you. Great handle ergonomics, very, very comfortable. It's gonna be slightly thicker at that 5/32 of an inch thick, and it has USA-made CPM 3V steel, which is a great super steel as well. It is gonna be about $70 more, at about $330, give or take, but you are going to get a dedicated compact fixed blade that's going to have a lot more ergonomics and overall, I believe, capability on the more bushcraft side of things. On the flip side, if you want to save yourself some money and get something a little bit more on that size range, you could look at the Line Steel T5. This is an excellent tool. It is going to be a little bit heavier, a little bit thicker, but it's made in Italy with Sleipner steel, which is also a very good steel, not on the level of Cruwear, but it is a good steel, and it has a much fuller, bigger, more ergonomic handle with a very large guard that's full micarta, that's going to feel very comfortable to use, and at about 5 inches as well. But with the extra thickness, you're going to get a lot better chopping, a lot more confidence in your batoning and side splitting and other things that you might be doing, as well as in your stabbing and piercing if you are using it in more of a field tactical knife role. And so those are two that I could suggest for you. I will have links for all three blades in the description box below if any of these tools make sense for you. I do appreciate it when you use the hyperlinks below, and I appreciate your guys' feedback. What do you think about this Benchmade Anonimus? Do you own one? Particularly if you have one, what's your experience? What do you see? I always love hearing the comments and your guys' take, and I appreciate you guys coming in, week out, clicking, watching, thumbs up. I always appreciate that, and leaving those comments. You guys are amazing, and I appreciate you, the Gideon's Tactical family. And until next time, always remember, stay equipped, stay prepared, and I'll see you out there.